birthday cards, homemade. I'll look through those when I get home. Okay, she has a question here. What was school like when you went to St. Nicholas School? Well, it was certainly different than it is now. There was only 2 classrooms, the first 4 grades and the last 4 grades, and we had nuns teaching us. There were 3 nuns here. One taught the first 4 grades, the other one the last 4 grades, and then one was the cook. And we used to always have a chance to help the sisters, and it was always a delight to help them, because at the end of whatever they asked you to do, you got a piece of cake or a cookie and some Kool-Aid, and that was the big treat in those days. So it was a little bit different than it is now. But it's still the same school. They're still teaching the same message, and that is they're teaching Jesus, and that's what's important. Here the question is, how many students were in your class? 4. Unfortunately, there were 2 boys and 2 girls. And that was that way for the first 4 years. The last 4 years, one of the girls that was behind us, a grade, was so smart that they moved her up a grade, and then she was in our class too. And that made it difficult for the rest of us because she was so smart. But we were glad to have her. So there were 4 for the first year, 4 years, and 5 in the last 4. This is another question. Were you a server when you were here at St. Nicholas? Yes, that was different too. We started to learn how to serve in the first grade already. And back in those days, the Mass was all in Latin. And so the servers had to learn in Latin the prayers that were prayed at the beginning of Mass. And there was about maybe 5 minutes of prayers that were prayed before the Mass started, known as the prayers at the foot of the altar. And so there were usually, for a weekday Mass, there were like 2 servers, but for Sundays, we had what's known as a High Mass. And at the High Mass, there was always 4 servers. And then there were always extra candles lit on the altar for that High Mass. But during the week, there were usually just 2 of us, or 2 servers, not just me. But what was interesting was, like, since I lived so close, just across the creek here, whenever there was a Christmas break, when the students got off for Christmas, or during summer vacation, usually we were asked to serve because we lived so close. It was not only us, but those who lived closest were asked to serve. What I remember especially was during Christmas break, many times there would just be the server and the priest here in this church. And the only lit lights that were on were these lights up here on the altar. That's all that was needed. And so that always impressed me. That was such a nice feeling. It was a nice warm church, just these few lights on here and just the priest and I at the altar. And that just kind of stuck with me. And I think it's kind of one of the reasons why I became a priest. But I remember that as clear as though it were yesterday. So, I was a server for 8 years. And then after 8 years, went to St. Leonard. So then I was a server there as well. So I served for about 8 and 12 is 22 years. So served for quite a while. And it's a privilege to serve, and I hope the servers realize that and recognize that. And I'm glad to see that Father Weddington is having extra servers that are not old enough yet to be up here and watch and be a participant in the Mass in that way. So thank you very much for the question. I will look at all these cards when I get home. This question is from the 4th grade, or the 4th question. Did you go to church during school? And very similar to you, yes, we had Mass every day, and went to Mass every day. And back in those days, like I said, the Mass was in Latin, and so it was kind of difficult for us to follow along, but we were there doing our best to praise God in the best way that we knew how. And I remember when I was, I guess, in the 1st grade or 2, being in the front bench, and the floor of the church then was linoleum, and it was basically white with gray squares in it. And I remember kneeling in that first bench, and if I looked down, I could make the floor come up. And that's how I spent most of my time in Mass. So yeah, we went to Mass today. Thank you.
When did you know you wanted to become a priest?
Okay, there was no bright lights, no flashing sun or anything like such. It was, like I say, starting to serve Mass here in the 1st grade and having that experience like I described it during the Christmas break. That was one thing I'm sure that contributed to it. And then at home, we used to play Mass. We used to pretend that we were having Mass at home, and that kind of kept my interest going. And so sometimes I would be able to be the priest. Other times it was one of my other brothers. I had 4 other brothers, and so it was kind of competition to see who was going to be the priest. And then I just kind of had an idea I'd like to do that, but I never said anything to Mom and Dad. I never said anything to the priest. But one day, the pastor here at that time was Father Betts, and he asked me, he said, Frank, would you want to try becoming a priest? And I said, well, yeah, I think I'd be open to that. And so he said, well, I'll call St. Minor and make arrangements. And so in September, you 3 were going to St. Minor and go down and give it a try. And so I thought, well, it's worthwhile. I'll give it a try. And in those days, I don't know whether traveling that far was anything special, but it was certainly special to me. I had never been further than Sunman or possibly Batesville away from home. And this then was a 3-hour trip, about 300 some miles away from home. And that was kind of scary. But I did not really know for sure that I wanted to be a priest until several years later. But every year we would be challenged whether we want to come back in September to St. Minor or not. And each time it was just a matter of, well, this last year was okay, I guess I'll try it again. And then you just kind of keep going. It just kept evolving. I became more and more interested in becoming a priest, and so I stayed 12 years, and then at the end of the 12th year, I was ordained. And so it was nothing fantastic. It was just that I had an inkling I'd like to be, but I didn't have the nerve to say anything about it. So I just kind of left it happen, and God got me where He wanted me to be. Thank you. we were ordained, each newly ordained priest got 2 weeks before they were given their assignment. And so during those 2 weeks, we came home. And so I was ordained May the 3rd in 1958. And I think that was a Thursday. And so that following Sunday, I had my first Mass here at St. Nicholas. Actually, my first Mass was May the 3rd, the ordination Mass, the Mass during which we were ordained was our first Mass. But the first Mass where I was by myself, the celebrant at the altar, was that following Sunday after my ordination. When I was ordained, there were like 12 priests for the archdiocese ordained at the same time. And now we're down to 3. 3 of us are left out of the original 12. And today, I think, in the seminary now we have, well, this coming year there's going to be, I think, 4 fellows ordained. But after that, I think for 2 years we won't have anybody ordained. And so that's going to be heard in the archdiocese as more and more of the priests that have been ordained are getting older and older, and we're able to do less and less. And so I hope that some of the fellows here today are remembering to pray and asking God to get them where He wants them to be, whether it be a priest or whatever, but pray that God directs you to where He wants you to be. So my first Mass was very memorable. All my family and relatives and the church was jam-packed. Many people from the parish were here, and so that was very